Is that on? One, two. No. One. No. One. No. That's off. One. No. One. Is that not on? I need. This is on though. One. One. No, don't swap it. I'm going to take this one off. Because this one's making noise. Ajay, where is this one? এটা কোনটা লোকের কাছে? This one was this. Okay, put it on back then. One. 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 Two. One. Two. That's fine. Change, it's not gonna work.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه يا ربي لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك. Welcome to all the brothers. This event is specifically organized aiming at our youth and our young brothers and inshallah sisters and family members who are with us via YouTube, our YouTube channel. We welcome everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are blessed in this moment to have with us our Imam for Taraweeh, Sheikh Yasir Quraisi. I will ask him to come and recite from the Holy Quran, inshallah. تفضل فضيلة الشيخ ياسر قريشي.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وتوكل على الحي الذي لا يموت وسبح بحمده وكفى به بذنوب عباده خبيرا. الذي خلق السماوات والأرض وما بينهما في 6 أيام في 6 أيام ثم استوى على العرش الرحمن فاسأل به خبيرا وإذا قيل لهم اسجدوا للرحمن قالوا وما الرحمن أنسجد لما تأمرنا أنسجد لما تأمرنا وزادهم نفورا تبارك الذي جعل في السماء بروجا تبارك الذي جعل في السماء بروجا وجعل فيها سراجا وقمرا منيرا وهو الذي جعل الليل والنهار خلفة لمن أراد أن يذكر أو أراد شكورا وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا يمشون على الأرض هونا وإذا خاطبهم الجاهلون قالوا سلاما وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا وإذا خاطبهم الجاهلون قالوا سلاما صدق الله العظيم.
We're grateful to our Sheikh who came directly from Egypt. Inshallah, this is the first time we will have in our mosque from the best reciters, one of the best reciters of Egypt, leading Taraweeh with us, inshallah, this Ramadan. So hopefully the experience will be a good one, and inshallah we can continue in the future too. May Allah accept all of us, may Allah accept his coming and all the time we'll spend here, and all of us for joining him in this good moment. Amin. Today, like I said earlier, this is a program aiming at a younger generation, and we want to discuss the topic of Ramadan, because Ramadan is few days away from us. So we initially booked Imam Mursalin Mia for the presentation. However, he was in Turkey helping out in the disaster situation, and he's not well at the moment. He's positive on COVID, so obviously he's isolating himself. We have found a equally good replacement, Ustad Hussein Shifar. So Ustad Hussein Shifar will present a small nasiha, about 20 minutes to half an hour, on the topic of preparation for Ramadan. Just to say a few words on Ustad Hussein Shifar. I've known him personally. He's been involved in dawah since secondary school, college, university life, and his work life. All of it he has been part of in some way involved in dawah. And Ustad Hussein Shifar is a teacher by profession. He's currently the deputy head in one of the primary schools in the UK. So without delaying any further, I'd like to ask Ustad Hussein Shifar to come to the stage and deliver his talk. Ustad Hussein Shifar.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا مولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم عبده ورسوله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم. Alhamdulillah. What a beautiful masjid you have. I remember with Brother Monjur in the 90s, we used to go to the little masjid that was in the basement. Yeah, the uncles are nodding, they remember it. And we used to have very little space. And I think sometimes the Jum'ah prayers, they used to be in 2 Jum'ah prayers. And we used to run in, try to see if we can just find that little space that we can. And then I think you moved slightly towards this, or was it here? I can't remember exactly. It was exactly here. SubhanAllah. And look at where you are. SubhanAllah. Can everyone say Alhamdulillah? Shukran lillah. There are moments like this where we should show gratitude to Allah, and we should show gratitude and thankfulness to those who have been part of it. But more importantly, Alhamdulillah, our uncles in particular, they've come to this country back in the 50s and 60s. They've managed to get halal meat. Then they've managed to establish mosques. Now some of our younger uncles, if you like, they're involved in creating and building mosques like this. Every single one of you here, you should feel part of this masjid. You should build a relationship with this masjid so that you are the one who then rebuilds and builds it even further, inshallah. Can we all say inshallah? It's really, really important that we have this niyyah, this intention in our hearts that whatever has been done for us, alhamdulillah, we're grateful to that for them and for that. But at the same time, it has to be a case of, I want to be part of that. And wanting to be part of that is also part of Iman. There is also something else that is part of Iman. That is the part of our faith. True faith is when you long for some ibadah to come to you. Certain ibadah, certain acts of worship, you can't do certain times. For example, Umrah. Can you just get up in the morning and just go to Umrah? No, we don't live in Mecca. So we're not able to be able to do that. We don't live in Saudi Arabia that we can just catch a taxi and then go and do Umrah. But having this longing to go to Umrah is part of Iman. You want to do an act of ibadah. Wanting to do Hajj and having the longing to do Hajj is an act of Iman. The same way, longing for Ramadan, even though for somebody who doesn't have faith, who doesn't have Iman, they may say, how can you be longing? How can I be wanting? And how could I be waiting for Ramadan to come? I have to refrain from eating and drinking. These are long hours. It's much more difficult. But a person of faith, a person of true Iman, he longs for these things. He waits for these things. The same way we should get into the habit of waiting for the next prayer to come. Because we're waiting for the next prayer to come and we are in the act of ibadah. So Ramadan is knocking literally and is at our doorstep. Only a few days away. We're into the 26th of Sha'ban. Possibly we're looking at Wednesday, Thursday. We're looking at the beginning of Ramadan. And every single one of us should be feeling and hoping that we want to be part of Ramadan. I want to be the one fasting. I want to get the best of Ramadan. So let us make a very short dua, which is Allahumma ballighna Ramadan. Can everyone say Allahumma ballighna Ramadan? And this means, oh Allah, make us reach Ramadan. It's not just a case of, oh, I want to fulfill I just want to reach Ramadan, because there will be people who perhaps even in the next few days will not be living any further in the month of Ramadan. And we want to be part of Ramadan. And having that longing and feeling for Ramadan is an act of Iman, but also this is a way for us to make us better Muslims, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 183, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. O you who believe, whenever you hear يا أيها الذين آمنوا, every time you hear it in the Quran, think that this is now talking to me. قل يا أيها الكافرون. That's not me. But you can say it. It's saying to the kafirun, those who disbelieve. But everyone says, Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu, O you who believe, O believers. So this is now talking to us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is directly talking to us. Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu, O you who believe. Kutiba alaykumus siyam. The word kutiba means something that has been written. When something has been written, it means it's been prescribed. Just like the doctor prescribes medicine. We call that prescribed. So therefore, it's been prescribed to you that you have this medicine. So kutiba alaykumus siyam. As-siyam, fasting, has been prescribed for you. That means it has been made obligatory for us. It has been made fard for us. Kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum. As it was prescribed for those before you. La'allakum tattaqun. So that you may gain taqwa. And I'll come back to that. First of all, let's look at kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum. As it was prescribed for those before you. What's the purpose of this information? I want you to think. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that fasting has been prescribed for us. We got that clear. But now, dig deep. It's saying, as it was prescribed for those before you. Why is this information important? It's telling us several things, but let's cover a couple of things. First of all, it's telling us that this is not something new for the believers. For the believers, people who have believed in Allah and the last day, people who have believed in the books, people who believed in the prophets before the ummah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they too were the people who connected with Allah, who became better believers by fasting. This is the first thing this is telling us, that this is not something new. Fasting has been something of a way to gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fasting has been a way to become better believers. The second point is that this was a practice of other prophets. like Prophet Isa alayhi salam and others, they used to practice fasting. So therefore you'll find that in other religions as well, they have the practice of fasting, refraining from food and drink, refraining from that which is normally halal during the daytime is something that was a way for us to gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the second. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Now you have why fasting has been prescribed for you. So that you may gain taqwa. Now taqwa has several meanings. We can have, and you'll probably have various talks here, or maybe a day program or a half a day program just talking about what the word taqwa means and how to gain taqwa. So you can see the word لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. That's where the word taqwa is. Yeah, so that you can become of those people who have taqwa. It doesn't use the word taqwa, but tattaqun are those people who have taqwa. What is taqwa? A very easy way to understand taqwa is, imagine there are thorns around you. So you're trying to pass through and you're trying to get to a destination. And there are lots of thorns that you have to pass through. What do you do? Do you go through these thorns and get hurt? No, that's not something that you would do. You would try to navigate your way around so that you get to your destination without getting hurt. Taqwa is this. Taqwa is navigating around your life through a path of Sirat al-Mustaqim, through a path of what Allah has prescribed for us, and avoiding these thorns, avoiding the sins, avoiding that which will take us away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The opposite of taqwa, or the opposite of the way of taqwa, is the way of shaitan. That's the way we have to think about it. So taqwa is, so when you are navigating your way through your life and through the things that you do, you are mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because you are thinking, as soon as you're about to do something haram, you're about to step onto a thorn, you're thinking, no, I can't do this. Allah is watching. So being mindful is one of the meanings of taqwa. The second meaning of taqwa is restraining yourself. Because what you're doing is, you are, sometimes it's not only thorns, sometimes it's pleasures of life. Certain pleasures of life, certain things that gives you pleasure. You're keeping away from that. That is also restraining yourself. Somebody is doing something to you, you want to hit them back, you restrain yourself. That is taqwa. At that moment in time, if you are mindful of Allah and you keep yourself away from doing that harm, that is taqwa. So another meaning of taqwa is restraining yourself, self-restraint. It's called self-restraint. It's not somebody else restraining you. It's you restrain yourself from doing that wrong. So that's another meaning of taqwa. Another meaning of taqwa is being fearful of Allah. At certain times you want to do something that is not prescribed for you, that is haram, and you say, I fear Allah. I fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I am not going to do that act. Just like Yusuf alayhi salam, when he was almost lured into the woman was inviting him, he says, Ma'ad Allah. Right? Allah is enough for me. Allah is sufficient for me. I'm going to fear Allah. At that moment in time, he used the shield of taqwa. And the word shield I'm coming to in a moment. So he used the shield of taqwa to restrain himself, being mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he was then able to keep on the right path. And that is the path, and that is the reason behind fasting. So when we are fasting, the first thing we've got to do when we're preparing for Ramadan, the topic is tonight is preparing for Ramadan, is our own mindset. Change your mindset to one that is thinking of Ramadan whereby I want to achieve taqwa. I don't want this Ramadan and this fasting to be one where I'm simply fasting, keeping away from food and drink, and that's it. And Prophet ﷺ says in a hadith, Allah does not need the fasting of a person who simply keeps away from food and drink and is backbiting and slandering and all of those things. In other words, You are only going to get the benefit of fasting if you're on the path of taqwa, of self-restraint, of being mindful of Allah and being fearful of Allah. More you are doing this during the month of Ramadan, more you're able to get the best out of Ramadan, the best out of fasting. So let's change our mindset. Let's get our mindset into a mode of, I want to achieve taqwa in this month of Ramadan. I want this Ramadan to be the best Ramadan ever, from which I transform myself. I am a much better Muslim than I had been before the beginning of Ramadan. And at the end of Ramadan, I'm actually a better person. Even my family, they recognize that I am no longer the same person I used to be. I don't swear like I used to. I don't get involved in fights like I used to. I don't quarrel and argue like I used to. I'm much more doing my dhikr. I recite much more of the Quran. I'm more mindful of my salah. These are the kind of things that we change our mindsets towards, so that inshallah we were able to get the best after Ramadan. Let me wake you up a little bit. Who knows which year fasting of Ramadan began? Let me ask, anybody know? What was the year in which the month of Ramadan? Because the Prophet ﷺ, as soon as Iqra was revealed, it was, although the word Iqra and Quran was revealed in the month of Ramadan, fasting did not begin straight away. Anybody know what year it was? Anyone want to guess? No guessing at all? Yeah? Year of the Hijrah? No. Yeah, around this sort of time, not bad. Yes, 624 CE. Okay, it's not the Hijrah year, 624. Okay, a few years after, it's about 14 years after the revelation. So 610 was the revelation, think of 624. So when Ramadan began for the Prophet ﷺ and the companions, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. In fact, there was the change of the Qibla, which was a major test. You can read more about that one. I can't go into detail. That was a major test for them. There were battles that were fought in the month of Ramadan. And Battle of Badr was fought in the month of Ramadan. So whenever you're thinking the days are hard and it's hot and so on, just think the companions of the Prophet ﷺ in their first Ramadan, they were actually in battles. They had to make sure that they are not only just able to keep the day away from work and things like that, they were actually fighting at the time of Ramadan. Now, we're only a few days away from Ramadan. Again, changing that mindset is one where we think, what is it that I'm going to get out of Ramadan? And here is a prize. The Prophet ﷺ says in a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, he said, there is a gate in paradise called Ar-Rayyan. And those who observe fasting will enter through it on the day of resurrection, and none except them will enter through it. Only the fasting people will enter through this special gate. It's called Ar-Rayyan. And inshallah, may Allah give us all tawfiq to be the fasting people that enter the gate of Ar-Rayyan. Ameen. Another hadith I want everyone, if you don't remember anything else from tonight, I want you to go away with this hadith. The very simple hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And you'll hear this hadith a lot, which is As-Siyamu Junnah. Repeat after me. As-Siyamu Junnah. Now you can hear the word Jannah in the word Junnah, okay, but it's not Jannah, it's Junnah. Junnah means a shield. A shield. Now, whenever you hear words like Jannah, Jannah is a protected space. A garden is a protected space. It protects you. Junnah means a shield. In other words, something that protects you. So one of the purpose of fasting is to protect us from sins, is to protect us from the arrows of shaitan. And so therefore, what we're doing by fasting, and you'll agree with me, those of you who have fasted before, is that whenever we're fasting, we're doing more good. Whenever we're fasting, we keep away from bad. And you see, even within your community, some schools, they tell you that, the behavior in the schools improve during the month of Ramadan. Why? because everybody's shielding themselves from what is bad around them. So as-siyamu, what is it? As-siyamu Junnah. As-siyamu Junnah. So you've now memorized the hadith. Alhamdulillah. From this night, you have memorized the hadith. A hadith is very simple. There are only two words. And Prophet ﷺ was known for being able to express a lot in a few words. Yeah, as-siyamu Junnah. Remember this, inshallah. There's another hadith where Prophet ﷺ says, if someone draws near to Allah during Ramadan with some good act, he will be like one who fulfills an obligatory act in another month. And he who fulfills an obligatory duty, it will be like one who fulfills 70 obligatory duties in another month. In other words, the reward of fasting is immense. So therefore, whenever we are thinking about fasting, think about, okay, there is a lot to gain from this month, and I want to be the one who gets the best prize, which is the gate of Ar-Rayyan, inshallah. May Allah give us tawfiq. Ameen. Now, I want to finish off with a few things that we can do in the next few days in order to be better prepared. The first thing everyone should do is think about what you're going to do with recitation of the Quran. How many of you are planning to do a khatam, at least one khatam, which is to read from the beginning to end? Can I just have a show of hands that you're intending to complete the recitation of the Quran? Alhamdulillah. It's really great to see so many of you are already thinking about doing something like that. You got to plan this. You got to plan, when am I going to do it? Because alhamdulillah, those of you who are going to schools and colleges, you will have at least the 2 weeks, probably 3 days in or a week and a half in, depending on when it is. You'll get at least 2 weeks. That will give you some time. But the Ramadan is also a month of Quran. This is the time we stop doing any other studies. Not to say that if you have exams and school studies to go do, you have to do those as well, just like any work that you have to carry out. But Ramadan is a month of Quran. But try to not only recite, not just the qira'ah. Qira'ah is important. Every harf, every letter that you recite in the month of Ramadan, you're getting much, much more, 70 or more. Allah knows how much rewards you get. But try to see if you can at least study the Quran. If there is a tafsir happening here or anywhere else, or if you can't get a book to study tafsir, you can go to YouTube, and there are many which gives you like juz by juz, one juz each day, and they're very short summary of what each juz is about. Because Quran is not just a book to be recited. It's a book to be studied and understood and practiced. That's the key thing. We can't simply just be reciting, which is like the Qari he was reciting. We need to understand the meanings of what the message of the Quran is. But remember, Quran was revealed in the month of Ramadan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. Ramadan is the month in which the Quran was sent down. هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان. That it was sent as a guidance and as a clear signs for guidance and judgment between right and wrong. Interestingly, anybody know what surah was recited by the Qari before, the Imam? What was the surah he recited? Anybody know? Surah Al-Furqan, surah number 25. Yeah? At least, pick up a surah like Surah Al-Furqan or any other surahs. Okay, try to memorize and to understand, and then try to practice this, inshallah. So, first thing is recitation of the Quran. The month of the Ramadan is also a month of making supplications to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, making dua to Allah. Because one of the dua that is accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the fasting person. The dua that is accepted by Allah is the fasting person. So make lots and lots of time. After every salah, sit down, make some dua. Every moment that you get, make dua, make supplications to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Very, very important. Prophet ﷺ says there are three whose supplication is not rejected. One who has just ended a fast. So this is at the time of ending the fast. a just Imam and one who has been wrong, whose supplication is raised by Allah above the clouds and for which the gates of heaven are open. Allah says, I swear by my might that I shall certainly help you, though it be after some time. So making a plan and also making supplications to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is really, really important. Final thing I want to mention before I finish, inshallah, is one of the things we should try and do before we begin the month of Ramadan is is what I call tying up loose ends. If there are people that you've hurt, if there was a fight that you had with somebody, if you quarreled with somebody and you're not getting on with somebody, especially if it's your family members, start with your family members and make up with them. Because that will give you a good heart to begin with. Very often before people go to Umrah or they go to Hajj, or sometimes before they know that they're about to pass away, they ask people to forgive them. And before every Ramadan is a good time. If you know you've hurt a person, if you know that you've wronged a person, or anything like that, try to make up with them beforehand. Especially if there are people that you know and there are people that you are in your family, inshallah. Which brings me to my last thing I want to mention, inshallah. Take a challenge. I'm going to give every single one of you a challenge. How many of you have a mobile phone? Okay. Try to see how much you can switch it off. Have a plan that I will not be on the mobile phone. Get out of Instagram or any other TikTok or any others. I don't even know. I can't keep up with some of these anymore. Try to switch off technology as much as possible. Younger brothers, how much you have prayed tahajjud that night, make it between you and Allah only. You don't need to put it on Facebook. SubhanAllah, you won't believe this. There were so many people in tahajjud prayer and I was praying at the back. Okay? The moment you share it is great. Sometimes, you see these things. The moment you share it, you risk. I'm not saying it necessarily is the case because only Allah knows. But you risk losing some of the barakah of your act of worship. So try not to do. One reason why fasting is so rewarded is because only you and Allah know that you are fasting, right? Because you could be eating. When you are praying, everybody knows. When you're doing Hajj, everyone knows. But when you are fasting, it's between you and Allah. So keep it between you and Allah as much as possible. Unless you really have to, it's part of your job to show some pictures of mosques and things like that. Try not to. Even family WhatsApp groups and all of those things, try to keep these acts of ibadah between you and Allah as much as possible. And that will be a shield for you, inshallah. What's the hadith? Who can remember the hadith I mentioned? As-siyamu. I want to hear the whole line. Who can give me the whole line of hadith? Yes? As-siyamu junnah. Somebody from this side. What's the hadith? As-siyamu junnah. Everyone together. As-siyamu junnah. Fasting is a shield. Inshallah, fasting is a shield. May Allah give us tawfiq to get the best out of Ramadan. Allahumma ballighna Ramadan. And one of the best dua to make, if you haven't learned it, learn this dua, is Allahumma innaka afuwun tuhibbul afwa fa'fu anna. Oh Allah, you love to forgive. Allahumma innaka afu. Oh Allah, you love to forgive. Allah, you are the afu, you are the forgiving. Tuhibbul afwa, you love to forgive. Fa'fu anna, so forgive us. Keep reciting, don't wait for Laylatul Qadr. We often hear it on the last night of Laylatul Qadr. It's the dua of the whole month and beyond, inshallah. May Allah give us tawfiq. Wa akhi da'una alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Are there any questions or anybody else want to raise anything else? One thing I've forgotten to mention is getting aware and familiarizing yourself the rules of fasting before. Very often we're on the 9th day, 10th day, we're asking questions that we should be prepared for. So try to get those rules. If you have any questions, try to ask the Imam or anybody that you know who is knowledgeable, or just get a hold of a book. Try to read around the rules of fasting. It's very well known anyway, but if you have anything particular, you can ask beforehand, inshallah. You're very tired. Jazakallah khair. Yes. Very good, very good. Did everybody get this question? What's the way to deal with procrastination? What is procrastination, first of all? Anybody know what is procrastination? Yes? You leave things for the last minute, or you kind of leave it, right? And there is a hikmah. There is a great sheikh. His name is Ibn Atiyya Secondary. He's actually Egyptian. Okay? He actually says in one of his hikmah that postponing good deeds, postponing, that means you put off doing good deeds for a later period, is a sign of foolishness. Right? So you always try to remember. So first thing that you could keep in your mind is that every time I'm postponing, every time I'm putting off a good deed for a later time, it's a sign that I'm not somebody who is using intelligence. I'm not somebody who is using wisdom. Now, what is the way to deal with procrastination? And it's a whole topic, so it's really, really good question. The first time I've been asked this question in a session like this, I'm really glad. I would love to deal with this in more detail. First of all, you've got to ask yourself what's important to you. Okay, and remember, I go back to what I said earlier on, right at the beginning, change your mindset. If it's important to you, would you put it off? You wouldn't put it off, would you? If I was to tell you that just as soon as you get out of this door, okay, you'll get £1 million. How many of you will put it off? I'll see every single one of you, including the uncles. We have got to admit it, right? We're all going to be running towards that door, and we want that £1 million. Or if I was to say the latest car, you know, whatever the car that we want is available for us. We know what's important to us. So the first thing about dealing with procrastination is knowing what's important to you. What is important, you will not put off. Now, let me give you a couple of useful tips for dealing with procrastination. That's the general thing, which is if it's important to you, you know you will not put it off. So ask yourself, every time you're procrastinating, you're putting something off, is this important to me? Am I giving the thing that I'm putting off its due importance? Okay. I'll give you a couple of little tips with procrastination. Number one is, how many of you have heard of something called Eat That Frog? Anybody heard that? Okay. Eat That Frog, it comes from a very famous guy who wrote a book in the middle of the 20th century. And he came up with this idea that every morning when you are looking at things that you have to do, for example, some of you, a lot of you here from secondary students, you might say, you know what, I've got science work to do, I've got maths work to do, I've got English to do. I know science comes really easy to me, so I'm going to do science first. And then I'll do maths, and then I'll do English. And I'm going to put off English towards the end. Why? Because that's the hardest for me. Eat that frog means you do the hardest thing first. In other words, eat the frog. Who likes eating frog? Anybody likes eating frog? Right. Nobody wants to eat the frog. Right? So eat that frog basically means that you eat or you do the thing that you dislike most first. Okay? That's one way to deal with procrastination. I'll tell you one other way that you can deal with procrastination. When you are doing certain things and other things come your way, you write it down. Right? And you say, okay, I'm going to do this later. So inshallah, I hope you've got a couple of practical things to go away with. May Allah give us tawfiq. Really good question.
Once again, thank you very much. Jazakumullah khairan, Ustad Hussein. It was a pleasure to have you here. And inshallah, the words you've shared with us, the word of wisdom and advice and nasiha, if we take something from it, we will benefit from it. So what I would say, everyone should take one thing. Target to take one thing from a presentation. Obviously, you won't be able to remember everything, and you will not be able to practice everything. But if you target yourself from everything that I hear, every presentation that I hear, I will take one thing, you will see over time, you've got lots of practical tips that are improving your life. Brothers, you are here today. You are here today. I want you to ask you, are we not the Muslims that believe that there is one Allah? Yes. Are we not the Muslims that have declared that Quran is the true word of Allah? Yes. Are we not the Muslims that have said we believe in paradise? We believe in hellfire? They are truth? Yes. Likewise, brothers, while we're sitting here, I want to share a hadith with you. And this hadith is very famous. I'm going to read the Arabic first and then translate it into English. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال ما اجتمع قوم في بيت من بيوت الله تعالى يتلون كتاب الله ويتدارسونه بينهم إلا نزلت عليهم السكينة وغشيتهم الرحمة وحفتهم الملائكة وذكر الله في من عنده. This is the famous hadith, and the meaning is, no people or group of people sit in a masjid like the way we're sitting here, in any of the houses of Allah, any masjid, and they read the Quran, word of Allah, which you recited at the beginning. They teach each other from it, and that doesn't happen except tranquility descends upon them from Allah, and rahmah of Allah fills them up, and the angels come and surrounds them, and more importantly, zakarahumullahu, and Allah mentions them by name, zakarahumullahu fi man indahu, the angels that are close to Allah, people that are close to Allah. So brothers, while we're sitting here, just as we believe in Allah, just as we believe in the Prophet, just as we believe in the Quran, just as we believe in the Malaika, just as we believe in the hereafter, we believe in the Sirat, we believe in the Yawm al-Qiyamah, we believe that this gathering mentioned by Allah, the people that are close to Him. We believe that angels are all around, filling this place, that some scholars said if a needle were to be dropped from the heavens, the needle will not touch the earth because that many angels have covered this place. These are all truth. They're not stories. They're not fantasies. They're not made up fiction. These are truth because Prophet, peace be upon you, have said so. So we are here today believing that Allah is witnessing this and Allah is rewarding us for coming here. Our next speaker is a local brother, Tariq Hussain, who lives a few steps away from the mosque. Tariq Hussain is a local brother. He's a writer. He's been writing on Muslim countries and travel guide to Muslim countries. He has done intensive research on Muslims in Britain and Muslims in Europe, particularly Balkans. I am going to ask, he's setting up some artifacts. Please do not touch them, or we can go around and see them. I'm going to ask when Brother Tariq is ready, come and share his presentation with us. And he has slideshows, so inshallah we can all see his slides. So when Brother Tariq is ready, we will enjoy the slideshows. So everyone, you got 2 minutes toilet break. Please do not go outside, stay inside the mosque. And after this session with Brother Tariq, we've got food upstairs, inshallah. So do not leave without having the food. But you're not allowed to go outside the mosque. Please stay inside the mosque.
Hello. This one. Hello. Yo, brothers, we're just going to start in 2 minutes. Could you get seated, please? Brothers, could we get seated, please? We're about to start the next presentation.
Assalamualaikum. Okay, brothers, if you are going to stay for this, and I assume you all are, you'd really need to see the screen. So all of you lounging at the back or chilling in the back there, it's probably better if you can at least see the screen because the entire presentation is about the screen. To be honest, you don't even need to see me, you need to see the screen. Okay, so is Brother Monjo still in the building? Is somebody going to do an introduction, or do I just go straight in? Monjo, wait. Asoniabo. There you are, you also. I do apologize about the delay, guys. It only dawned on Monjudway about 10 minutes ago that I was going to do a presentation. So we had to go and find a TV, find a laptop, and all the other hassle. Now, I'm a teacher by profession, which is why this is going to feel a little bit like a lesson. I might even pick on you. Okay? Then I'll start.
Okay. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This part of the session is going to be very interactive. Brothers, it's going to be very interactive. Food is on its way. We should have food coming in about 15, 20 minutes, if not already here. After this session, we'll go upstairs for food. But before that, young man, I need you to listen. Brothers over there, I need you to listen. You at the back, could you pay attention, please? Over there, I can still hear people talking. I don't want to mention names because I know some people talking there. I need full attention. Brother Tariq is a local brother, local boy, grew up in this area, just a few steps away from the mosque. Alhamdulillah, Allah has blessed him with the writing ability and he's written several books and he has traveled many Muslim land. We live in a non-Muslim country and Brother Tariq has done lots of research on it. Some of the insights that you and I, by reading one or two books, we will not get that. So I'm going to ask Brother Tariq to share some of his findings with us, some of the unique findings that we won't easily find by ourselves. So Brother Tariq, please start.
Okay, thank you very much, Munjabay. First of all, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you all for coming here this evening. Now, I'm actually, as I said, I'm a teacher, so I'm used to wandering around. So if you do find me wandering away from the microphone, I do apologize. I do have quite a loud voice that projects anyway. Okay, so I know the main concern here is YouTube. That's why I have to stay near the microphone, apparently. Okay, so over the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to be answering the question that you can see on the screen, which is there a Muslim Europe? As Manjubai just said, we live in a non-Muslim country. But hopefully by the end of this session, you're going to realize that being British and being European, we actually have a very long and very rich Islamic heritage. And the way that I'm going to answer these questions is, first of all, I'm going to give you a quick overview of Europe's historic and living indigenous Muslim presence. Now, those of you that might not understand what the word indigenous means, it means people who are from and of the land originally. Okay? And that's something that normally, when you tell people that Europe has indigenous Muslims, they tend to frown because they believe there is no such thing as through and through European Muslims. Hopefully by the end of this session, you'll see that that is absolute nonsense. And I'm going to use my own work to remind you of this living indigenous European Muslim culture. And then I'm going to show you a glimpse of an overlooked and very rich British Muslim heritage. Are we okay with the microphone? You need me to? Okay. So, the first picture on your screen that you see is in Cyprus, which might surprise a few of you. It is known as the Hala Sultan Teki. Reportedly, this is the bit that's going to shock you if Monjubai gets out of the way, because people are trying to actually see this. This timing is really bad, isn't it? Okay, reportedly, the final resting place of a woman known as Haram, who was quite possibly a maternal aunt of none other than the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Hence, Hala, which comes from the word Hala. Most of us in Bangladeshi, we have Khalas. It's usually on your mother's side. That's where the name comes from. That's why it's called Hala Sultan Teki. She died in Cyprus, which is part of Europe, as you all know, in 649. That means the very first generation of Muslims were in Europe. In fact, some believe the great Khalifa Abu Bakr also made it onto Cyprus as well. So what does this tell us? It tells us that Muslim Europe is 14 centuries old. As old as Islam itself. Now, the second picture might be a bit more familiar to some of you, especially those of you that have traveled. I can see some of my friends in the audience who have been to these places. This, of course, is an image of the Alhambra. And the Alhambra evokes the most glorious Muslim history of Europe in what was known as Al-Andalus, the region we today know as Spain and Portugal, where from 711 to 1492, do the maths, it's over 800 years, nearly 800 years, where a cultured and flourishing Abrahamic civilization, that means Muslims, Jews, and Christians all lived together and achieved unbelievable things for the time. It was one of the most tolerant societies across the entire European continent. And it was led by the Islamic faith. The pinnacle of which was in 929 AD. So some of you will have seen at the beginning that glorious mihrab, which is from the Mezquita Cathedral in Cordoba. And in that Mezquita Cathedral, when it was a mosque, in 929 AD, Abdurrahman III declared himself Khalif. We had European Khalifa. And I doubt many of you would have known that before you walked into this session today. So 7 centuries of indigenous Muslim Europe can be found in that peninsula. But the thing about history is, it's easy to dismiss. People can just say, well, that's history. You know, Muslims were here, but you're not here anymore. And that's where my book comes in. You see, in order to write my book, I did a journey through a living Muslim Europe. And as you can see, from the sentence underlined, which I will read for all of those over there who can't see the screen, Europe has long turned a blind eye, or worse, looked askance at its own Islamic self. In other words, Europe has never really been comfortable with the Muslimness within it. And that's what this journey was about, which I'm going to take you on now. I'm going to take you on a quick snapshot of the journey that I took as part of the book that is over there. And it was to explore this living indigenous Muslim Europe. In other words, Muslims who are through and through European. They've never been nothing else. And for each stop and each image that I take you to, I'm going to be showing you a little bit about what I discovered on this journey, which in itself is quite depressing, really, given that, you know, I'm a European and I actually go out my way to study these things. And even I didn't know half of what I found out there. Now, it was actually a road trip that I took with my family. 6 weeks, 4 of us in a tiny car, which sounds like a recipe for a disaster, and in many ways it was. But we won't go into that right now. I left that bit out of the book. And for 6 weeks during the summer, we traveled through 6 countries. Now, these countries were chosen deliberately. Hands up if you think Europe has Muslim countries. Where do you think are Muslim countries? Fantastic. Any others? Turkey? They don't even consider that Europe, I'm afraid. But good shout, because a bit of it is. A bit of it is. This side of Istanbul, apparently. Yes. Kosovo. Fantastic. Now, why is it that when you talk to people, though, and you say Europe has Muslim countries, they look at you like you've completely lost the plot? And yet, of course, as this young gentleman here and the gentleman over there rightly identified, Europe has at least 3 quote-unquote Muslim countries. What I mean by that is there are over 50% of the population profess to Islam. Now, I did say at the beginning I was a teacher. Now, you know how teachers can embarrass people who talk, right? Gentlemen, please. I should teach Monjabay about this. The way teachers get people to be quiet is actually shut up themselves. Suddenly the people talking realize nobody's talking. Okay, I know you want to chat and everything, but it's really distracting for me, okay? Let's try and keep that stumm. So 6 countries. We started off in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which of course is a Muslim country. We actually started off in a Muslim city, Sarajevo, which was founded by the Ottomans. And then we went through Serbia, Kosovo, North Macedonia, Albania, and Montenegro, all of which have at least 6 centuries of Islamic heritage across these countries. And as I said to you, 3 of them have a Muslim majority population. Bosnia and Herzegovina has over 50%, Albania has over 70%, and Kosovo over 90%. That's more than some other countries across the world that we consider to be Muslim. And yet, like I say, if you were to say to somebody, oh, you know, I visited a Muslim country in Europe, they'd consider that to be an oxymoron. You can Google that later. Now, as part of this journey, I took with me a guide. You'll notice in the top right-hand corner of the map, a gentleman on horseback wearing a turban. His name is Evliya Çelebi. Now, Evliya Çelebi is a 17th century Ottoman traveler who traveled through these lands as well, and he wrote about it. And the reason I took Evliya Çelebi with me is because Evliya Çelebi was traveling when the Ottomans were at their absolute zenith, the height of their power. In other words, Evliya Çelebi was traveling through here when it was the most Muslim it had ever been. And he offered a tantalizing glimpse of what had been deliberately eradicated. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how that's been done shortly. But before I do, given that Evliya Çelebi was such an amazing guide for me, I should tell you a little bit about him. So in the name Evliya, you may have heard the word Awliya. And so Evliya Çelebi considered himself, well, he was part of a great Sufi lineage, and he was considering himself a friend of God. That's what Awliya means. And his father was actually the goldsmith to Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. So he came from pretty impressive stock. In fact, his father built the golden spout that you see coming out of the top of the Kaaba. So this is some seriously impressive heritage right here. And this is the gentleman that I followed in his footsteps. So I'm going to take you first to this beautiful bridge in Mostar. And the reason I came to this bridge, there were a number of reasons. It was also one of the first bridges, it was one of the first places where I realized the depth of the historic Islamophobia towards the Muslim culture of the region. And what I mean by that is this. The Starry Mosque, as it is popularly known, was built in the 16th century by a student of Mimar Sinan. Many people think it's Mimar Sinan. Mimar Sinan is the greatest Ottoman architect to have ever lived. And Hayruddin, his student, is who built this. It was commissioned by none other than Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, probably the greatest Ottoman sultan that ever lived. Someone who was respected across the globe, not just by Muslims. And yet, in spite of the evidence that this was a beautiful bridge built by the Ottomans, this is what a famous English archaeologist, as recently as 1897, said, Sir Arthur Evans. These are the people, by the way, whose books all the people who now teach us read, so you can think about that. This is what Sir Arthur Evans said. He believed it had to be Roman. He believed something so beautiful could not possibly be built by Muslims. And the painter, Charlotte de Lezerne, when she came through it, she said, and I quote, "It is a marvelous remnant of Latin civilization in the midst of Turkish barbarity." So again, attributing it to Romans and saying that the Turks, the Muslims, were simply too barbaric to build something so beautiful. The other reason I went to this bridge was because it was one of the first places that I really connected with Evliya Çelebi, who also visited the bridge during his travels. But it's also a bridge that, of course, is a very, very powerful symbol. What you're looking at is not the original bridge. The original bridge was destroyed in the 1990s Balkans War in what was known by many and one particular Harvard observer as cultural genocide. It was, of course, a real genocide, for those of you that know about these things. But this was also going on, trying to eradicate the actual identity of the Muslim community in these places. And then brick by brick, it was rebuilt because of the efforts of some very, very empowered local people, including one particular gentleman called Amir Pasic, who just simply refused to accept that it had been destroyed. And he went on a lengthy campaign, raised loads of money, got the likes of Turkey to support him, and eventually the UN as well. And they rebuilt it brick by brick using Ottoman experts on Ottoman architecture. So after this, very close by to the south, I went to a place called Blagaj Teki. Now this Teki in the south is probably one of the most beautiful little monuments I've been to, and I knew nothing about it before I arrived. And again, Evliya Çelebi led me there, because Evliya Çelebi visited this place way back in the 17th century. It goes all the way back to the 16th century and is still a functioning Sufi lodge even to this day. And it was originally founded by a sect called the Bektashis. Today, it's in the custody of the Naqshbandis. But these are all elements of Islamic heritage that we know almost nothing about. And the Bektashis are quite dominant across Europe because of the Ottomans, who introduced them through their Janissary corps. But it was also a place where, again, I felt like I connected with Elia on a very intimate level. Because Chalabi arrived here shortly after losing his father, who was one of his great spiritual guides, and losing his great patron, Melik Pasha, who was the person that supported him to travel around. And so it was amazing to enter a space and actually feel that I was in the same place as someone as great as the Ottoman traveler. Now, what I put in front of you is an image of a librarian in what is quite an obscure, quote unquote, obscure place in the middle of Bosnia. Now, even people who have been to Bosnia tend to visit these three places, Sarajevo, Mostar, and Blagaj. Very few people know anything about Zenica, which is in the center of the country. And I was only led there because my Bosnian friend is from there. And he said to me, you must come and visit my madrasa from when I was a young boy. And then next to it was this library. And then this guy goes over to these dusty books. He pulls open a book, and it is over 600 years old, a book of fiqh that combines Hanafi and Shafi'i fiqh. Just there on the shelf. No gloves, no glass cabinets. And it blew me away. The book is actually older than Sarajevo. It blew me away because I realized how many of these gems, these treasures, these pieces of our heritage as Muslims of Europe now, were sitting on dusty shelves, either being ignored or potentially being destroyed. And how many had been destroyed during that cultural genocide? The gentleman himself is like an Ottoman relic because his name is Ibrahim Babic Effendi, which is, of course, an Ottoman title as well. Now, I'm going to pick on somebody again. What do you think you're looking at here? A dome, very good. What about the patterns? What kind of dome are we looking at? Anyone who follows me knows what this is. You can see nobody clearly follows me in here. So what you're looking at probably looks like it belongs in Florence, maybe even Rome. And yet, it's a mosque in North Macedonia. And you're looking at a beautiful art style that was developed by the Ottomans during the 18th century, known as the Tulip art style, where they combined classical Baroque Rococo, in other words, classical European art with classical Islamic. In other words, it is probably one of the only fusions of classical European with classical Islamic. It's a European Muslim art style. We all know about maybe Moorish art. You might have even heard of things like Mamluk art, Fatimid art, in terms of Islamic art. But you've probably never heard of this. So it's another example of this heritage that lies out there that we know almost nothing about. And then we have a coffee seller. Now he's actually he's selling coffee in a town called Novi Pazar in Serbia. Before I went to this place, I didn't even know Serbians could be Muslim. I mean, I know they could convert, but I didn't know there were Serbian Muslims. And so when I arrived in this place, we arrived late in the evening, and as you can imagine, children were hungry. And as you can imagine, being children, they wanted pizza. So we went looking for pizza. We'd seen lots of minarets on the way in, and we assumed, this would be a good place to grab some food. We sat down, and the pizza sign said sausage on the pizza. And of course, to us, sausage means pork. So I went and asked the guy at the window, brother, is the sausage pork? Is it halal? He laughed at me. He said, brother, don't you realize the whole town is Muslim? Serbia. There are entire towns that are Muslim in Serbia, and we knew nothing about it. But the reason I've got the coffee seller up there is because it's also one of the places where they were harboring a beautiful tradition. Not this particular coffee seller, but another one. When I went to buy my coffee, refused my payment. He wouldn't take my payment. Now, I'm a very well-traveled individual, as you can imagine. It's my job. I thought, okay, fair enough, I'll pull up some more notes. You obviously want to rip me off. This is just what happens on the road. It's part and parcel of traveling. All your parents know this if you don't. Okay, we always talk about how badly we got ripped off. So I kept putting notes into his hands, and he kept refusing. And then he said to me, Musafir. And then he put his hands up. Anyone want to take a guess? I like this. Now, this is the kind of student I like. Yes? It was for free, but why? You know what musafir means? I was musafir. And then why did he put his hands up? The traveler's dua. He was referring to that beautiful hadith where we are told that Allah accepts the dua of free without condition. And one of them is the dua of the musafir. He valued my dua more than he valued the business. It wasn't this particular gentleman, because I will be very candid with you. I was on the verge of tears. I was not thinking about Instagram. But this was just to show you that this beautiful tradition, and it's a tradition that the Ottomans observed as well, as many imperial Muslim rulers did as well, because you may have heard of the term caravanserai. A caravanserai was basically the equivalent of a trading holiday inn, where traders could stay for 3 days and 3 nights, and the Sultan paid for their bill. Because in our tradition, to look after the musafir is one of the greatest honors that you can do. And across many Muslim countries to this day, if a traveler turns up for 3 days and 3 nights, they will not let them pay for anything. So it almost blew my mind. It did blow my mind, actually. It certainly left me shocked and stunned that not only did I find Muslims in Serbia, I found an entire Muslim town, and then I found a town that was harboring one of the most beautiful ancient Islamic traditions. That's how little we know about all of this. And then I'm going to end my tour through the Balkans, at least, in front of this place. You see, this is another town in Serbia called Niš. It's just up the road from Novi Pazar, but this is a very different place. Less than 1% of the population here are Muslim according to the census. So I knew it would be difficult, but I had Evliya Çelebi with me, and I was reading his description, and I knew that once upon a time the place was full of Muslims. In fact, I even saw a medieval picture by a pilgrim who had sketched the place, and it had minarets like it was a bed of needles. So I knew there was Islamic heritage there. And what I did was I downloaded a local app. App has since disappeared, nothing to do with me, by the way. And I followed the app because the app was about the Turkish occupation. That's what they call the Ottoman period. And I can relate. And the Serbian resistance. So I thought, this is great. This is going to show me some of the Turkish heritage. And it did. I went to the original Turkish gates. I went to the original Turkish arsenal, not those at the top of the league, but where they keep the guns. And then I went to this place. And when I got here, it suddenly got very frustrating because the app refused to tell me why it had brought me here. It would not tell me why it had brought me on a trail to a Jewish synagogue. I mean, all synagogues are Jewish, but you see the point. It refused to tell me that. It would not explain that. But I knew, because obviously I do my research, I read my history. I knew why it had brought me there, but the app wasn't telling me. Because of course, in telling me why it brought me there, it would have to admit that the Ottomans had done something amazingly positive. You see, that is a Sephardic synagogue. Does anybody know what it means when we say Sephardic? Maybe the gentleman over there who are constantly talking. Young man, do you know what Sephardic means? No. All right, maybe you should shut up then. Okay, because I've tried to tolerate it, but it's getting really bad. And I can't actually look at my notes because you lot are just nattering. Sephardic means of Spain. So what is a Spanish synagogue doing in Serbia? I'll tell you what it's doing there. You see, the reason Spain has no Muslim heritage is the same reason it has no Jewish heritage. All of us were kicked out. And when the Catholic monarchs kicked the Jews out of Spain, Sultan Bayezid, the Ottoman Sultan Bayezid II, sent his entire naval fleet to pick up these refugees and give them a new home. So the reason Sephardic Judaism continued in Europe was because the Ottoman sultans gave them homes across the Balkans. Of course, they're now empty because of something horrific that happened later. I stood there feeling quite angry and frustrated that it refused to tell me this. And then I had this moment when I realized that between the Ottoman period and the Umayyad period, as in the Spanish period, for 12 centuries, our European Muslim forefathers stood side by side with the most marginalized, most discriminated religious group in Europe. That's something we should be extremely proud of. Unfortunately, we're often just taught the history of Jews in Europe from the darker side. In other words, what happened in mostly Christian lands. And this again is our heritage that we know nothing about. I came away feeling proud of my European Jewish heritage as a Muslim. I no longer felt guilty about stuff that I had nothing to do with. I felt proud that the sultans of Ottomans and the Umayyads did this amazing thing. Now you just told me I've got 5 minutes. I've only just got to Britain. Okay, I'm going to sprint through this. Okay, anyone know what that is? It's a gold coin. Have a read. It says Offa Rex in the middle. If anyone studied Latin, that means King Offa. This is a coin that was minted in the 8th century by an Anglo-Saxon king. That means an English king in the 8th century. That's a century after Islam was announced. In this country, by the Anglo-Saxon king Offa of Mercia, with the declaration of faith, the Shahada on it, and his own name. Why? Why is one of the first kings of England minting a gold coin with the Islamic Shahada on it? Well, actually, we don't know. But it's not important in many ways. Of course, it'd be great if we found out that he somehow accepted Islam all those years ago, but it's not important. What is important is that this categorically makes clear that Islam was in this country 12 centuries ago. 12 centuries. Not when your dad came, not when your granddad came, 12 centuries ago. There's a lot of work to do, but I've been doing some work, and I'm going to bring you a bit closer to today. I created 2 heritage trails so that people like you and the mosque can take you to do these trails so you can learn your history. They're down in Woking. One of them is called Britain's Muslim Heritage Trail number 1, the Woking Trail, and the other one is called the Muslim Cemetery Walk. The Woking Trail takes you to 3 of the most important sites of Muslim heritage in Britain. The Shah Jahan Mosque right there is like a miniature Taj Mahal. You just want to pick it up and put it on your mantelpiece. It's beautiful. Built in 1889. Interestingly, by someone of Jewish stock, whose picture is over there. Also, you see here the country's first Muslim cemetery. That's the stone that marks it. That was founded in 1884. It's even older than the mosque. And then finally, you also have probably the only known Muslim soldiers' burial ground anywhere in Europe. These 3 spaces are not just the oldest in Britain, they are the oldest in northwestern Europe. And yet it is not a part of your history lessons. It's not a part of your curriculum. It's not even a part of your madrasa lessons, but we'll get to that later when I talk to Munjabay about that. Now, as well as the Woking Trail, which takes you to these 3 places and explains why they're so important, the trail also that I developed takes you to the cemetery because it is the final resting place of some of the most important Brits to the earliest part of that Muslim heritage I just showed you. In fact, when that Muslim heritage was flourishing, it was mainly white people that were Muslim. It was so influential as a mosque, it was known, quote unquote, as the Makkah of Europe. Not literally, metaphorically. In the cemetery lies this particular gentleman. He was Britain's very first Ottoman-endorsed Sheikhul Islam of Britain. We had a Sheikhul Islam of Britain, like a Grand Mufti, like a Qadi, whatever you wish to call it. His name was Abdullah Quilliam. It's also the final resting place of probably the greatest, oh, I've done that the wrong way around, right? Also the final resting place of the greatest translator in English of the Quran, Marmaduke Pictor, who just popped up on the screen. It's also the final resting place of the last Ottoman princess and wife of the last Nizam of Hyderabad. And finally, personal favorite, an actual British descendant of the Prophet ﷺ, Princess Musbah Haider, daughter of the ex-Grand Sharif of Makkah, who is half British and of course half Arab. And that concludes my talk, as I can see. Okay, thank you very much, guys.
Jazakumullah khairan. I know there's so much to cover, and as a classroom setting, we're not fit for that. So everyone's sitting down, people are restless, we've been sitting for a while. So I sincerely appreciate all the younger brothers putting up with, the sitting arrangement, inshallah. If the food is already here, so we're going to go upstairs. Before we go upstairs, Brother Tariq has his latest book here. If anyone wants to take his book, he will sign it from here, inshallah. He's selling it. So please feel free to go and have a look. If you wish to buy, Brother Tariq will sign it for you. before we go upstairs for food, are there any questions the brothers would like to ask? Any clarifications, anything out of interest? Or any comments? Right. In that case, without any delay, can I ask everyone quietly, no need to rush, slowly go upstairs, please. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for your patience and thank you for sitting here so nicely. Assalamu alaikum once again. I apologize.